Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 866, Gary's here and we've got lots to talk about. We've got new builds of Windows 11 I'm going to talk about, but we've also got some interesting stuff about the Microsoft band, something from one of the Microsoft team, sort of inside the Microsoft team, talking about his time on Microsoft band and the rise and fall of it, really. We'll be talking about are EVs expensive to own? We'll be talking about AI and deepfake technology and lots more, so let's get straight to Gary. Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
And no Richard tonight because he's out experiencing the launch of the was it Artemis rocket?
Yeah, the cancelled launch of the Artemis rocket so far. Anyway, I was just looking to see if I could figure out when it was being rescheduled for, but I haven't managed to find that yet.
Yeah, I mean, Richard was kind of if it actually happens, it'd be very lucky. So unfortunately, he was right. So I'm not sure whether, like you said, whether he's going to be back in time or whether he's missed out. But yeah, they'll probably launch one the day he travels back or something like that. But anyway, we're here and we've got quite a good few things to talk about. We've got new builds, there's some Surface Pro or Surface news potentially, or rumours that we can talk about. But I wanted to start this week with a really interesting article I came across about the much loved and missed Microsoft band. Well, much missed from our side anyway.
Yeah,
I'll share that. So this is an article on Medium from a developer who was on the band team back in 2014 at launch up until the end of it, and he talks about, and I'll include a link in the show notes as well, how people were lining up for the band and how they'd really managed to get a good launch of it, of the band, and the people got really excited for it. And it was like the first time he'd seen a queue outside a Microsoft store for the band. And going back to the siren, I remember, in fact, my bands are still up there. I was really excited about the band launch because it was the first time I think we've seen for a while that consumers were interested in Microsoft products, other than the Xbox. It was something directly targeted at consumers. Maybe Windows Phone was to a degree, but the band certainly was. And I liked the band at the time because it was I think I'm right probably saying it's probably the only cross-platform smart wearable device on that you could buy at that time. As in cross-platforms, it supported Windows Phone, iOS, and Android. And I think I've still got my band up here. I'm going to have a look for it. Yes, there's one of them. That's the second gen one. It's a lovely device, and I'm still going to hold it now. Actually, I still really like this, and if it wasn't for Microsoft dropping the support of it, I would be wearing this every day. And it's got the Windows logo on there. It's comfortable. I'd say it's probably more comfortable than the watch I've got. And a lovely device. I've forgotten how nice it is. The second gen, the first gen, admittedly, was a bit clunky and that sort of thin feel, but this is a lovely metal design, curved screen. You can see the nice curve on there, and when you compare it to like my Samsung watch, it's not got the same features, but actually I think it's a more elegant design, certainly for that time period. I'm going to leave mine on now for the rest of the show, but a very elegant design, and I was a big fan of the band. But anyway, in the post they talk about, the developer talks about what it was like being back on the band team at that time when and the fact that it came from an Xbox. It was originally an Xbox accessory, which is probably why it had that consumer focus. Even those days when Microsoft seemed to care more about consumers, it was still very consumer based. And and it's the things that went against it. They were trying to do cross-platform stuff when I suppose not every in those days at Microsoft, not everything was cross-platform, and you remember it. You remember it well in those days. If it didn't work on their, there was a stage of time, a period of time, wasn't, where if something didn't work, it doesn't matter if it didn't work on iOS or Android. It was like you couldn't even get Office, could you, at that stage on any non-Microsoft device?
No, you couldn't. It was not cross-platform was not their credo at that time.
Yeah. So actually, for something like the band, that was actually something that they were pushing boundaries, and of course the developer goes on to say, it was one of the they weren't using Git or anything like that in those days, and they were working across platform, and there was no Xamarin or anything like that, to help out. And they were doing all this from scratch. There was no these frameworks that they could use. And he said one thing that was interesting is that they couldn't develop any feature that would make Windows Phone look bad. So he said that the Android and iOS platform, the SDKs, were a couple of years ahead of Windows, so that they could do a lot more with the band with those devices. But they weren't able to do that because the anything that would make Windows Phone look substandard, then they couldn't do. So so it was kind of hobbled from the start, the fact that it was cross-platform, and I suppose that's fairly right, because we would have been up in arms, wouldn't we, if we said the Microsoft band works best with iOS or Android and doesn't work as well on Windows Phone, because in those days, I think back to 2014, Microsoft was still in with the shout. Anyway, it goes on to talk about how the band had was developed and had a great launch. Of course, it mentions the hardware failure. If you remember, the band split on the hardware. I think I had 2 of the first gen ones, but no such issues with the second one. And in fact, the third gen band was in development until 2014, when and it also said he talks about as well when they cut a lot of testers as well. So something that we talked about back on the show at the time, would this affect quality, and it did. But he's talking about back in 2016 when Microsoft cancelled the band, and which he, even though as one of the developers, he would say it was the right thing to do. Pebble, which is one of your favourites, got bought out. I think it was by Fitbit, wasn't it? Then Fitbit was acquired by Google. Was it the Pebble you had?
Yeah, Pebble was what I had. I remember us watching those numbers going up on the.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, there was it was a Kickstarter, and we were watching the numbers tick up, weren't we? As we were refreshing the page, it was into millions, wasn't it? That got pledged for that launch.
I
think
you're probably right. The band was the competition for the band has now really come from the 2 main players in the watch sphere, which is the Samsung watch you've got and the Apple Watch. They're behemoths which are very difficult to break into, as Fitbit are finding now, and Garmin as well with their watches. Their market share is really falling, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. So then in 2016, he said there was a great moment where they were thanked for the great launch, and then a day later they were shut down. So, which he said he reminded him of the Silicon Valley TV series where Gary Belson did that at Hulu. That was a great show as well. So it's kind of sad that sad story about the band, but it's Microsoft did switch the strategy. They spent the money on Azure, which has paid off handsomely, and the band is now into the tech history, or it's on the shelf of doom over there. But as I'm playing with this now, I forgot how much I actually like that screen on it, and it had some nice features on there, especially for the time. So anyway, so you can read all about that on this Medium post. And there's a bit of the SDK on there as well, a bit of talk about the developer stuff as well. And I think the same guy also wrote a good article about imposter syndrome as well. I'm working at Microsoft, so you can check that out. So I'll link for that in the show notes. But band, it reminded me of how nice a device this is and how nice it feels. But yeah, and you have the UV sensor on it and all sorts of things. But yeah, the watches and the things now, they're not as exciting now. I don't think they are as the technology just standardizes. And you see the launch of the Galaxy 4, Galaxy Watch 4, and it's not a huge amount of difference to the two. I know it's got the different software and everything else, but still, I don't feel the need to get one just yet anyway. But yeah, I remember it was a good time. I think we were at CES around that. It was probably the last one. We went to one of the events there, and we saw there was just people doing all sorts of different smartwatches with different e-ink displays and all sorts of things. It was a real time of sort of innovation until things standardized.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's some good times to be had at that time, but yeah, certainly some interesting innovations going on. I mean, as I said, I love the Pebble. I thought that was a fantastic device for its simplicity. You can still actually buy Pebbles. There's someone effectively bought the rights to Pebble and is actually selling them as is. But you can also use the Rebel thing, which is out there to run the Pebble if you have power one. Really good watch. I've moved on. I now use the Huawei one, which I've shown a few times. That works well as well. I just like a long battery life. That's my key thing. I know your watches are great, but they don't last. The charge doesn't last that long on them. So this one, even with all the features on it, is going to last me 14 days or so charge. So yeah. Unless my girls get the hang of it and start playing music on it, which they do quite regularly. And that does eat the power.
Yeah, I charge mine every night. I don't wear it during the night now, so I charge it at night. But yeah, I know what you mean. Some people like that, and I think the band I don't think I used to charge every day because I used to sleep with it. So I think I used to let it charge for an hour a day or something like that. Yeah, anyway, check out those links. And as I was looking for some pictures, I found all my articles that I've written about the band. And there was so many different things you could do with it, customizing it and SDKs and make your own apps and things like that. So anyway, so there's, yeah, I was kind of sad when I found all those. Now, moving more up to date, we got some builds last week, 25188 for the dev channel. And again, these builds haven't got a huge amount of features or really anything too exciting in there. There was a setting for the touch keyboard, which is always on, never, or when there's no keyboard attached. And I was surprised at that feature because I'm sure Windows 10 had that option anyway, but it must be one of the ones that got dropped because I remember having the icon at the bottom. You had a little touch button to bring it on. Anyway, my machine was a victim of one of those A/B testing, so I haven't got that setting yet, so I couldn't actually test that myself. But I've seen it in the release notes, and the rest of the changes were all fairly minor. There was I'd say one thing that's quite a significant change is the terminal. Windows terminal is now the default terminal. There is a setting you can change it and override it, but command prompt is being sent to history, going to the virtual shelf behind me of tech products. But yeah, as your developer, Garry, do you use terminal now, or do you still like the old command prompt?
I think it's both, to be honest. Depending on what I'm doing, some of the light stuff, which interface with it on home automation design, terminal works way better. Command prompt's still good for old stuff. I think also, obviously, use PowerShell as well. PowerShell's used for Azure stuff I work on. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, I tend to use the new terminal and I've got a PowerShell tab and I've got a tab for command prompt or whatever. So I don't use the old CMD thing. Although that is one of those things. As soon as you have any issues with Windows, that's one of the drop into that, and you can usually fix most things from there. But I suppose you've just got to get used to the new one. But anyway, that's a change that's in there, and the rest of the stuff was some links to Wi-Fi properties and things like that. So there wasn't a huge amount of in there, and the usual known issues in there, like anti-cheat. One that might be interesting for developers is that you can't enable the .NET Framework 3.5 with this build. So if you are running an application that has .NET Framework 3.5 and you didn't have it enabled, you try and enable it, that won't work. So I'm not sure if you can install 3.8, I guess, and then don't want most applications work that want to use 3.5 work if you've got 3.8 installed. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think they do. Not just what I looked at that.
But anyway, if you're on, if you've got a device on the dev channel, then these are the kind of things you can expect. So, but that was it with the new build. So I've got a build video up, but there's not a huge amount in there to talk about. We also got the build on the beta channel last week. And again, they're doing the thing with the two builds. So 22621 and 22622 hit the beta channel. And so if you've got 22621, you get the features turned off. If you've got 22622, you may have the features. You may not, but you've got the chance of having 621. You definitely don't. And if you have got 621, you can go into Windows Update and it offers you 622 as well. So you can pull that down. But again, it was just some fixes. At least SQL Server Management Studio has been fixed now as well, which is quite good, because beta is more likely to be used if you were using it on your own machine and sort of in production. And if you rely on SQL Management Studio, that's a bit of a pain if that won't launch anymore. But so you'd be glad to know that they fixed that one. And there's quite a bunch of fixes actually in this, and these applied to both, more or less both builds. I think 22622 has all the big fixes, and then there's a whole list of stuff got known for both builds. Still a couple of known issues about audio and Explorer exe crashes if you've got the Xbox Dev Kit working installed on there as well. So I would say the 22H2, I know we talked about it last week, but 22 is pretty much done now, and a couple of weeks and that will be out. Possibly they'll release it not for Patch Tuesday, but the week after or a few days after Patch Tuesday, so that as an optional update, or seeker as Microsoft call it. So I imagine that'll hit release preview possibly in the next week or the week after, next couple of weeks when we get to September, and then with a release in late middle of September for everybody else as a seeker. I'm guessing it'll be some weeks before it actually starts being pushed out as a forced install. But they could put it straight into there as the next Patch Tuesday and push that out. How are you getting on with your Windows 11 machine?
Yeah, it's working. I haven't signed it up on the Insider program yet. I am about to do that. But yeah, I've got it working. I've got used to the middle start button now. It's interesting. It's weird. Some of the features which HP supply with this laptop, which it's got those sort of halo lights you can get around your phone. Click on your phone. This has actually got an on-screen halo light, which I've got turned on at the moment. It's weird. I can't actually share my screen and show you because it disappears as soon as you try to do that. But
I think he's kind of reflecting in your glasses a bit. Actually, it makes quite a difference. That
it does, yeah. And you can change the colour tone on it as well. So I've got it quite yellow and sunny at the moment, but I can bring it down to cold and wintry.
It does, yeah.
And that's sort of like middle tone, and you can adjust the brightness as well. Really make it bright or dim it down to all levels you want, but that seems to be a fairly good balance and a little bit of colour to it. Yeah, it's quite cool actually. You can do that.
Actually, it makes
it does obscure the screen a bit because it's on top of the screen, obviously, to do it. But I can sort of move you around and put you in the middle of the screen so I can still see you. Yeah. But yeah, for doing Teams calls, it works remarkably well because the lighting in this room is never particularly brilliant, as probably people have seen on previous calls. So yeah, it's quite nice to be able to have that. as an option.
Yeah, that's quite good. Yeah, it's interesting some of the things that OEMs put on there, isn't it? That some of them are less useful than others, but yeah, it's nice. Some of them are like that are just nice to have, especially if you're trying to do something like that, get a good call. And I mean, everybody's using Teams and Zoom and everything else these days, so it's ideal for that. Does it detect when you're on the call, or do you have to sort of just enable? Is it just something
Yes, it does,
you can enable?
Yeah. No, as soon as the camera enables, it pops up and says, "Do you
Right.
want to turn it on?" So it's quite good in that respect. It gets out of the way as soon as you stop the call and do that. So it's pretty good in that respect. The other thing this camera's got it on it is all the AI effects, so you can do beautify mode and self-centering and everything. But I'm actually sitting quite a bit off center at the moment on this camera, and it's automatically centering me, which is quite nice. And if I start to move around, it would follow me, which is quite good. But yeah, it's definitely a better camera than I had on my previous laptop.
Yeah. Oh, for beautifying lights, as well as my Hue light, I've got the Whiz light on there at the moment. I'm using that actually over the weekend. Sat out in the garden with the light. Very, very nice. I've got a few people ask me about. Oh, I'd love one of them, especially because you can control it from your phone, even though you're outside and it's there's no mains around. So quite a few people ask me about that light. Yeah. So I'm glad you're getting okay with your laptop. It's once you get used to Windows 11, going back on Windows 10 does feel a bit
it does, yeah,
bit old.
I'll tell you the thing which I absolutely love, and I know we could do it with Power Tools, but the Teams mic button is just so useful. Or the general mute mic and put it on, because I quite often have my Teams. I've got 3 stacked screens because I've obviously got developed stuff and things going on, and often my Teams chat is actually right on my top window. And if the Teams call and I want to unmute the microphone, I'm sort of fighting with my mouse to get to the top of the screen to actually click that button. Without, I can just click this one down here, which is really nice, and it just works.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Actually, that's one good thing with this Jabra headset. If I lift the mic, it mutes and unmutes it. So that's quite a handy little feature.
Well, the other thing this laptop's got, and I hope you can hear the quality of it, but the mic array on it seems really good. I've actually unplugged my normal microphone at the moment, because this one here actually does seem to be quite good, and certainly the noise cancellation seems to work well as well. So
yeah, that's quite good. That's good. And talking of new devices, actually, I heard we've speculated on Surface devices. I did hear the rumors that the Surface Pro X is not so much killed off, but merged back into the Surface Pro line. So there won't be a Surface Pro X and a Surface Pro 9. It'll just be a Surface Pro 9, and one of the options will be an ARM-based version of that, which kind of makes sense, really, because there wasn't a huge amount of difference between the Pro X and the Pro 8 at the moment, anyway.
No.
So I think there might be a Surface event due fairly soon, where they're going to talk about those new devices. So I'm hoping for a Surface Go 3 with. It'd be nice to have an ARM-based one, actually. I still fancy trying an ARM-based device, and I said my Surface Go is it is definitely not playing anymore. So I could do it. I do like having a small tablet, so Surface Go will be something that I would look at a new version of that. So I don't want to get Surface Go 2 because it's they're going to. In fact, is it Surface Go? Are they on Surface Go 3 or Surface Go 2 now? I think they're on. They're on the 2, aren't they? I think I'll wait for the version 3 to come out. So I think yes. Oh, there is a 3. That's right. No, there is a Surface Go 3. It's Surface Go 4 that I'm waiting for, and hopefully one that's ARM-based as well. In fact, just looking at Microsoft sites, it's down to $349 now. The Surface Go 3. Unfortunately, that'll be for the horrible spec one, the 4 gig ROM, 64 gig eMMC for $349. It's not bad, but I just think that's not really that usable. That one, I think even the 4 gig. Well, there's a 4 gig, 64 gig. Oh, what's that? Yeah, there's the pricing on this Microsoft site seems a bit weird because they've got £5 difference between the 4 gig version and the 8 gig version. So for $349 you can get the 4 gig 64 gig eMMC. For $425 you can get the 4 gig 64 gig eMMC, or for $429 you can get the 8 gig 128. Yes, and actually they've got an i3 version as well, which is down to $585. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they'll be launching new on those. So I would like to see an ARM-based tablet, or as Richard will say, if they don't make one, does that mean that their ARM-based Windows project is gone? But I don't think so. I think they're still working on. I mean, you see a lot of features. I think it's the .NET frameworks, and there was some other applications recently come out that are just aimed at improving the experience on the ARM-based devices. So yeah, hopefully we'll see some new stuff from that soon. The other thing, talking about new stuff as well, I've seen a couple of articles I was going to ask you about saying, are EVs now becoming too expensive to own?
Yeah, I've seen some of those articles as well, and it's fair to query the cost of electricity going up, because obviously we know it's going up. We know the cap we keep talking about, it only applies to domestic electricity, so that's going up. And for those charge point operators, or CPOs as they're known in business, who are running all these public charges, their prices are just going through the roof because they're paying commercial kilowatt hours. Although, to be fair, some of those charge point operators are quite clever. They own things like they own solar farms and that, so they may have their own supply and be able to keep the charge costs down. I'm thinking of people like GridServe with their electric forecourts, which are usually connected to solar farms, so that they've got a bit of control over it. So there's an interesting calculator you can do at the moment, which shows what the current cost is. And at the moment, my car is costing around about 13 pence a mile if I charged on the most expensive chargers I can charge on out there. Now, actually, I actually get discounts on those chargers anyway. There's a couple of ways you can get discounts. A lot of the car manufacturers give you discounts if you use their own charge card. They've signed up with deals. And there's also a company called Bonnet who allow you to sort of pre-buy your electricity at a discounted rate. And although their rates have gone up, they're still substantially cheaper than paying these commercial rates. So, as ever, if you can pre-buy things or hedge against these cost increases, it's a good move to do. So, I would probably get slightly less than 30p. In fact, I know I do. I did a journey up to Knee or near the woods not so long ago and when I worked out the cost per mile on that was around about 9p per mile. Now, if we look at the average cost of petrol for a fuel for say petrol or diesel car, there's a really good site called Nimblefins who have actually done a really good look at this in great detail. I'll actually share the link so you can include it in the show notes. And they've sort of worked out what the average cost for a car in the UK. It's based on all the cars on the road, sort of the average consumptions, and they say that at the moment it's 20p per mile. Right. So that basically means my cost of charging has got to double before. Yeah, it's going to be more expensive for me to own an electric car than it is a petrol car, and that doesn't take into account the fact I actually charge mostly at home, and there's still some, even with the caps coming in, there's still you can still get less than 20p a kilowatt rates overnight. So you've got that's significantly less cost than that. That would be around about 4 or 5p a mile. So that's got to go quadruple before that becomes a problem for me. Now that doesn't really obviously take into account the fact that electric cars are buying a large, somewhat more expensive than their petrol and diesel equivalents. They shouldn't be. There's definitely an element of profiteering going on now because the excuse that battery packs and things were more expensive has gone out the window, and the other components in an electric car are way cheaper than the petrol and diesel car. The engines, replacing an engine with a motor, getting rid of gearboxes, getting rid of clutches, all that stuff is way cheaper to manufacture than a petrol motor is, petrol engine is, or gas or diesel engine. But there's always been this sort of thing saying, oh, but batteries are expensive. Well, they're not so much now. They come down greatly in cost, and the replacement cost is coming down as well. So this whole thing about this myth that if that you'll keep your car for 5 years and the battery will go and you'll have to replace it for great expenses is more a myth now, because you wouldn't have to replace it at great expense. And that's why EV conversions are starting to come in a lot cheaper now. Some people are starting to find that you can actually convert classic cars fairly easy to EVs at reasonably low prices, because there's a lot of battery packs out there which are, and then there's a lot of cars which have been done 200,000 or 300,000 miles, and their batteries are now available because people have finally got them to scrap them in the States, for example. And those batteries have still got 70-80% of their original life on them. Combine a couple of those packs and you've got a really cheap electric car. So there's a lot of things out there which can bring price down. The other thing which is happening is that we are starting to see some cheaper cars come onto the market. I mean, there's a huge amount of press this week about MG's new car, the MG4, which is a family hatch, traditional size family hatchback, bit golf size, probably a direct competitor for Volkswagen's ID3, which is getting golf size, but at £25,000, and with some pretty impressive monthly payment rates, which bring it into the sort of reasonably accessible level for a lot of people, compared to so the cost of an equivalent. So some of us worked out that because the depreciation rates on electric cars are much lower than on petrol and diesel cars at the moment. In fact, some electric cars are still appreciating rather than depreciating in value. The monthly payment rates are coming down. Insurance rates are starting to come down to match, because people are realising electric cars have less accidents than petrol and diesel cars, and they tend to have less damage done to them when they do have batteries. I mean, obviously, if the battery gets damaged in an accident, all bets are off, but that happens very rarely because manufacturers do know they need to protect the batteries, and they're pretty well shielded. So there's a lot of myths out there about them. There are some genuine issues and concerns. I mean, certainly the maintenance of the electric network definitely needs improving. We're starting to come out of the golden age of EV charging, where there are more chargers than there are drivers. We're certainly seeing at the bank holiday, but I mean generally at the bank holiday, this last bank holiday, there were queues coming out of the services to actually get into the services for anything and everything. Because they're overloaded, because we've never had so many people vacationing at home or holidaying at home as we have currently, and there's so many people on the roads going and wanting to stop at the same place at the same time, which equally applies to electric charging. There are queues at the petrol stations that the services have this weekend as well. I mean, I know someone who said they spent almost 2 hours waiting to get petrol at motorway services. So it works both ways. When there's crowds, and you get delays. But we do need chargers to work. The counter to that is on Saturday. I was travelling back from London. Had to do a slightly circuitous route because the crossing I was going to take was closed. Came back through on the Dartford crossing and stopped at the Lakeside, and all the chargers there, which they've now got a nice bank of chargers, were available. So I didn't have to wait at all. I could just top up the charge. And the other thing on cost, of course, is we still have these lovely destination charges in some places which are free of charge. For example, my local shopping centre still has free of charge charges, so you just pay for the parking. So I parked up on Sunday. We were going to an exhibition in town. Spent 2.5 hours wandering around the exhibition, came back, and I'd added 120 miles range to my car for nothing. Can't really do that with anything else other than an electric car. But I know I'm very proud. I know there are definitely counter arguments, but I'm very proud. I mean, one of the things I've heard quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, which is true, and I can't argue about this, is that some people are saying, well, with some EVs, and it doesn't apply to mine because I don't lose anything. But there's a thing called phantom drain, and this is basically where you leave the car standing and the amount of electricity from the battery goes down because it's just certain systems are sitting on draining power. I mean, this can happen with a petrol car as well. I mean, if you've got something like a dash cam plugged in and it's running all the time, it can drain your 12-volt battery. But this is the main battery getting drained. And in some cars, some of the older EVs, this could be quite high. I mean, you could be losing 20, 30 miles a day just by having the car sitting on things. And people used to come back from holidays and find the car drained. And battery management's gone a long way since then. We don't tend to have this. Systems get shut off, and you don't tend to see that. I mean, I left my car for a good 2 weeks, and it lost, I think, half a mile of range. And that was with my camera turning itself on and off occasionally to make sure nothing was happening. So yes, that is genuine. It's not something. It's something I look at when I'm buying a car to make sure it hasn't got phantom drainers, because that's one of the things I think is, especially now, if you're a car sitting there eating pennies, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So that's something to watch out for. But most of the stuff out there is myths and people putting injections in which are not necessarily real world injections. But there can be problems, and there are issues with all types of vehicles occasionally. And I'm not arguing that buying an EV is totally green, because any vehicle is not going to be green. There's always going to be construction costs and manufacturing stuff around it. And it's always going to be cheaper, better for the environment to walk or cycle or something or something like that. May not always be practical, especially if you've got small children, but that's the way the world.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I guess this is where, when you get in a vehicle, you just have to do your research and use these sites and try and calculate which is the best option for you. And each person's usage means it's a unique situation. You can try and work it out what's going to be the best thing for you. Absolutely.
And there's lots of sites out there to help you. If you want to calculate sort of what an EV would cost you in charging, there's the ZapMap site, which has got a lot of information and a charging calculator. I'll send you the link for that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
That to compare and contrast.
Yeah. All right. Great. I'll include that. There was one final thing I wanted to mention. We talked a couple of weeks about I think it was when you were on, it was Richard, was about the Amazon AI that could a 10-minute. It could take a 10-minute clip of your audio and then turn it into a voice that could read stories from you. And I think the Amazon headline was something like, your grandma can read you a story even though she's passed, or something like that. I found it a bit dubious of the uses of that. But I was interested in watching a TV show on BBC this week called The Catcher. I think it's on the second series now, and that is very much talking about that AI. And I think in this scenario, that there's a government minister supposedly doing an interview over a remote link, like we're doing now, but it was it him, and was it actually a China AI, using some kind of avatar to make him say things that he didn't say, and that kind of thing. And I wonder, and I guess that is stuff of science fiction, but from the conversation we had about the Amazon stuff a few weeks ago, it's getting closer and closer, isn't it? And
and you can do some amazing things about scarily amazing. I was given a demonstration of this a few years ago, and back then it wasn't particularly brilliant, but they just recorded about 15 minutes of me speaking, and then they had this thing talk back to me, order Chinese from me. For some reason, that's what they wanted to do with it. But yeah, it is pretty scary.
And especially when you think of anything, even just with audio, if someone rings you up and asking you for personal information, if it's how how good does that AI have to be to convince somebody, even if it sounds like someone you know? How long before if you had a call from someone with a recognizable voice, how long before you would pick up it's not them? And it's amazing, isn't it, that how quickly this technology is evolving, and at what point do you get to when you can't believe anything you see? I mean, we've already seen Marvel movies de-aging actors, and CGI characters, and this, but that in the past has always been rendered, doesn't it, and taken a lot of development, and take hours to render it all from us. But we're getting to the point where this is close to real time now. And I was just watching this show, and I think the idea of the show is obviously to exaggerate it and and to make a drama out of it. But as I was watching, I think sometimes these things are not as far away as you think. I remember watching J.J. Abrams' Person of Interest series when that first launched. I think 2015, something like that, which was about as an AI that could predict. I think it could predict crimes, couldn't it? And then it would give someone a social security number or something like that, and then they could intervene. And it was a weekly story, that kind of thing. But I'm pretty sure all the AI used in that is all doable now in the sort of the period that was created to. That was absolute science fiction there, but now a lot of that is predict. People, you can use AI to predict patterns, can't they? And what people do, and model groups of what actions groups of people will take, and all that kind of thing. So as well as the audio and the visual side of it. So yeah, very interesting stuff. But I'm sure it'll be one of those shows that we're talking about maybe a few years' time. So, do you remember when they said that? And it's already been done now. So it's not. Yeah, it's. It's definitely worth watching, as long as you've watched House of Dragon as well, because I think we're on episode 2 of that. There's no technology in that one to talk of, apart from the CGI stuff. But yeah, I'm still quite enjoying that. So it's good to have Game of Thrones back as well. Well, that's just about everything we've got time for this week. So where can we find you, Garry, and your links?
You can find me. Well, the easiest place is always to hit me up on Twitter at Garry Garry 2 R's WMA on Twitter, and you can find all the stuff I'll be twittering about out there about all my EV stuff. And I've almost finished editing that very long video I was talking about last week, or the other week, previous week. But that should be coming together fairly shortly, and I may have to split it into several episodes. It has got a bit long, but there's some interesting stuff in there.
And I think the next video I'm working on, I'm going to do, I haven't started yet, is an application I've used for ages, and someone's asked me about it. It's called DX Manager from FM Live for managing your Yamaha synths. I think I might have talked about this last week as well. I've certainly used it for a while. Yeah. So I actually posted a video about the MIDI cable, and someone said, what's that software you're using? So I've got an FM instrument, and I want to manage it. So I hadn't thought about doing a video, but thought, maybe I should do that, because it's an excellent application, and so I'll have a look at that. So I also got another track to play out. I haven't decided what it's going to be this week. I played the one with the bells on last week, which
I love that. That was great.
So I'm not sure what my next one is. I've been working on a mid-80s Pet Shop Boys up-tempo track with lots of 808 claps and that kind of stuff in there, a bit of Linn drum. So maybe I'll include one of those on it this week. And I've got to decide what I'm going to do next. In fact, I've got my synth ready for production. There it is, ready for some music this weekend. Right, so I'm at @sticks on Twitter, and we'll see you back here next week.
Indeed. See if Richard's got off the ground.